What are the must-watch football games this season? Shemar Page is an All American, and we have some storylines to watch out for in the track and field championship. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives, because the journey does not stop just because the microphone got cut off. Let's talk about something that's far in the future, right? Let's talk about the HBCU football season and the must-watch games. The Clarion Ledger, they put out an article recently detailing the best or the most must-watch game every single week of the season. So you have 14 games on the list, and it's a really good list, right? And I want to look at them because it's the season like 3 months away. We're looking at about the end of August. It's the beginning of June. So a little under 3 months away before we really get rolling with the season. But it's never too early to look. And that's why I don't mind the Clarion Ledger doing this, right? Because we're looking at not just Jackson State games because they're based out of Jackson. We're not looking at just that. We're looking at not just SWAC games. We're looking at MEAC SWAC games. There's no OVC versus CAA games, but there are Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, and Hampton in various games on this list. So it's not specific to just one conference. I feel like it's my vacation to come out here and speak on HBCU athletics. So I appreciate people who are doing that as well. And you have the Ledger giving this 3 months out in advance, but it's giving us some interesting topics. Let's go through every game, and then we're going to double back, and we're going to talk about 3 to 4 games that are just interesting matchups and not go through every single game because it is still 14 of them. So I'm going to go week by week. We're going to go into order or in order. So we're going to go Howard versus Alabama State, Jackson State versus Famu, Jackson State versus Tennessee State, Hampton versus Norfolk State, South Carolina State versus North Carolina A&T, Prairie View versus Grambling, Famu versus South Carolina State, Alcorn versus Southern, North Carolina Central versus South Carolina State, Alabama A&M versus Alabama State, Southern versus FAMU, Jackson State versus Alabama A&M, and then Jackson State versus Alcorn, and then lastly, the Bayou Classic and Southern versus Grambling. One thing that immediately jumped out to me was Jackson State had the most games on this list. Is it because the Ledger is in Jackson? Maybe. But also, these are some pretty good games. I think that when you're looking at them, for the most part, I understand why these games were here. I will tell you that we're not going to hone in on Jackson State versus FAMU. That's week 2. We've talked about that enough. I don't need to continue talking about, hey, Jackson State versus FAMU is the SWAC championship game, or it was last year, and it looks like it will be this year as well. So I'm not going to go into it. We've talked about it enough. We've highlighted it. I think that we know the importance of this game, and I'm sure as the season draws closer, we'll highlight it again. So I'm choosing to pass on it for some other games, and let's keep it in FAMU. Let's talk about FAMU versus South Carolina State. Last year, FAMU won that game 30-7. Now, if we're going to talk about the Orange Blossom Classic being like a SWAC championship, you're looking at Jackson State and you're looking at FAMU as the early preseason favorites to win the SWAC. I think they've earned that, and I think they deserve that. South Carolina State is also the early preseason favorite to win the MEAC. I think that they have earned that, and they deserve that. So with that being the case, you're looking at 2 teams in the SWAC and 1 team in the MEAC. Things don't usually work out perfectly, but let's just go under the pretense of how we look right now. You're looking at a potential Celebration Bowl preview. You could see Florida A&M versus South Carolina State, or maybe you won't. Maybe Jackson State gets there again. Maybe another team completely surprises. Maybe South Carolina State doesn't win the MEAC. Central is right there on their heels last year. So none of these things are promised. But one thing that is promised is that we should expect to see two of the best HBCU football teams square off against each other, and it's actually scheduled. We don't have to worry about wondering, well, if this happens and that happens, they can meet there. No, it's actually scheduled that we'll be able to see the Rattlers versus the Bulldogs. I'm excited to see what this is going to be. I would have considered Prairie View and Southern a game that is a must-watch game. You got Dooley returning to Southern, Dooley returning to Southern, the coach, but then he's returning to face off against his former team in the Prairie View Panthers. I think that would have been a great storyline, but unfortunately, that happened to happen in the same week as FAMU versus South Carolina State, and it just was a scratch. Sometimes you got great games that just have greater games in the same week. So I completely understand that, but I wouldn't have been mad if that was the must-see watch. I wouldn't at all with all the storylines involved there. Then we're going to go Hampton versus Norfolk State, and this is simple. Offensive explosion. Offensive explosion is all that I have to say here. Last year, I know Pookie Carter was there, but last year you had over 90 points. Hear me again, over 90 points scored in this game. I don't think it's going to be, 90 points again. However, I will be very interested in seeing how do they follow up from such a shootout. I got to see it. That's why this game is one of the ones that stuck out to me, strictly based off the performance of last year. I don't care that all the same players aren't there or anything of the sorts. I just feel like this is the game that's exciting. Then we're going to go with Howard versus Alabama State. This is the MEAC versus SWAC challenge, and the MEAC has had the upper hand. They've looked good in these games, and I think it's interesting because you look in the Celebration Bowl, the MEAC has had an upper hand. So in these big time games, the SWAC MEAC challenge versus the Celebration Bowl, you're looking at games where the MEAC is coming up victorious. And I mean, if I'm a MEAC fan, I'm over here giving all the bragging rights. I don't care that you had X, Y, and Z. You got a playoff team. You had the Jackson State Tigers. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna tell the SWAC every year, y'all still got to go through us, and it's good for you. All right, so that's why this is such a big game to me. Alabama State will have their first game under Eddie Robinson, and Howard is really heating things up as of late as well. So I love this pick, and it was the easy selection. And we're going to go from starting off the year to closing out the year with the Bayou Classic. And this is one that's great every single year. Every year you could put the Bayou Classic on here. I mean, you would because they're alone. But this is a national televised game, NBC. I believe it's still on NBC. But it's a national televised game. And what makes this more interesting is that you're going to have Dooley versus Hugh Jackson, two new regimes. And you hear Southern once on the list, but twice in my mentions. Southern and FAMU are right there behind Jackson State with three games on here. Jackson State have 4. So you're looking at the Jaguars, you're looking at the Rattlers, and you're looking at the Tigers as teams that the Clarion Ledger believes will be big-time teams going forward in the future. And one thing that's not in the future is this Shemar Page's outstanding season as a pitcher. He was absolutely crushing it at Grambling. I can't wait to break down how his All American is a very important achievement that we should publicize. But first, let me tell you about betonline.net. And we're talking about futures, NFL futures, right? You can bet on who's going to win the division, who's going to win X amount of games, who's going to win the AFC and NFC championship games, and who's going to win the Super Bowl. You have NFL futures. It's not too early to start betting. It's not too early to talk about HBCU football. It's not too early to start betting on NFL football. So make sure that you're getting a hand in that. And also, we're looking at game 3 tonight. Tonight is game 3. We'll see. Can the Celtics rebound? Will the Warriors get a game or steal a game in Boston the same way that Boston stole a game in San Fran? I think it's going to end up 2-2. But let me know what you think on betonline.net because they are the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. And if you can, do me one more favor, please, and go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Let us know what you like and what you don't like, what you would like to improve, what you want to stay in the show. Just give us your input for all of the shows around the network. And by doing such, you enter with a chance to get one of the $10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. So make sure that you guys are doing that. And today's word of the day is vacation, meaning an occupation or desire to do a certain kind of work. I want to talk about Shemar Page because he was doing work. He had a fantastic season, and it ends with being part of the second team D1 All American team, basically, right? So Shemar Page, his season was great before this accomplishment. He was the SWAC pitcher of the year. He's been one of the most dominant pitchers in the league the whole year. That you couldn't take that away from him. And when you're looking at him, now you can say All American attached to it. He is a NCAA Division I All American. And I feel the need to point out there is no separation in any sport other than football. And I say that because, yes, football is a big sport. And you have FBS. We'll go with Grambling. We'll use Grambling. You have FCS. And then you also have FBS. So the FBS are your big schools that you always think about, LSU versus Grambling, because we'll just keep it in the state, right? So Grambling is FCS. LSU is FBS. We all know this. But then with basketball, we talked about MJ Randolph and Joe Bryant being a part of essentially what was the mid-major MVP or player of the year list, right? We talked about that. So when you hear these things, FBS versus FCS is a literal divide. But then when you hear mid-majors and you hear Power 5 and Group of 5, a lot of times that can make you think that there is certain divides and or distinctions, I should say, excuse me, that belong in these sports. And the truth of the matter is there is no separation in anything other than football. But if you want to go with literal divides or figurative divides, take all of it out the window. Shemar Page is an All-American. He's right there with the LSUs, the Texas players. We're talking about those guys. He's right there. And I think that's important because not only will the divide sometimes you might not remember or realize that, oh, mid-major, Power 5, all same and on the same division. It also is a way that people say, oh, he's a great mid-major player, or he was a great FCS player. No, Shemar Page is up there with all of the best pitchers. He's one of the best pitchers in the country, point blank, period. There is no discussion about it. And this is just validation of that. Let's talk about his season, though. In this year, he had an 8-5 record in games that he started. And if we're talking about going the distance, he did that 5 times, which was second nationally. Everything that he did, in my opinion, is improved by when you look where does he stand nationally, right? He's gone inning 1 to 9 nationally. I mean, second most of everybody nationally. Then you're looking at his strikeouts. He had 143 strikeouts this season, where that ranks second nationally. Remember, when we say national, I'm going to keep saying it, because when we say national, we're talking about even beyond the scope of just the SWAC, even just beyond the scope of HBCU baseball. Now, we're talking about one of the guys who was dominant and has been great. He had, in addition to batting, in addition to pitching, he also was batting .351. He had 28 RBIs, 3 home runs. So it wasn't just as if, oh, he's a great pitcher. No, this dude was doing it all. But then you look at specifically pitching, just to bring it all together, you're looking at a guy who led the SWAC in ERA, on base average. We're talking about a guy who didn't allow any of the teams, none of the teams that he went against, had a better batting average than 200. No other player, no other pitcher in the SWAC can say that. Not a single pitcher. So this guy was absolutely dominant. And you see, I told you about the batting that he did in addition to his pitching. That's just a little bit of partially on top. But this guy had a phenomenal season. And I'm glad that it was validated by a second team All-American. I'm here for it. Another thing that I am here for is for going into track and field championships. It starts today. So let's highlight 2 storylines in particular that we need to be looking out for going into the NCAA track and field outdoor championships. But before I get into that, let's talk about Built Bar. I have people going crazy about these Built Bars. People come up to me and tell me, hey, man, I really do enjoy those Built Bars. I got my family members asking, man, when are we going to get some more Built Bars? And I tell them, look, they got the granola, and people already tell me, I'm trying to get the granola. Well, this is what you need to do. You need to go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your offer to get one of these Built Bars. I don't care if you're getting Built Bar, Built Puff, Built Granola. They are all absolutely delicious and covered in chocolate while being packed with protein, not being filled of carbs and sugar. No, you're getting all the great benefits of the protein, all the great benefits of great taste, but none of the downsides of having to feel fatty after. Go ahead and go to Built Bar and pick your pleasure. All right, so wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I want to talk about the NCAA Track and Field Championships. I have 2 storylines that you need to watch out for. It all begins today, right? So there's no better way to cap off today's show than to talk about track and field, This is how we had to do it. If we weren't going to open it, we had to close it that way. It was the only choice. And I'm happy about it because this leads in perfectly. You'll see the championships on Friday and Saturday. So we won't be talking about the championships this week. We'll try to get into it next week. Hopefully we have some really good, winners. We have some people, medaling. Hopefully we have a lot of good things to talk about. But you'll see that Friday and Saturday on ESPN3, I believe, is where you can catch it. Now let's talk about storylines going into it. And the biggest storyline for me is, how is North Carolina A&T going to perform in outdoors this year? We just saw them in indoors, but how are they going to perform in outdoors? I can only imagine how inspired that North Carolina A&T is, men and women. Let's go for both of them. We're going to give reasons for this for both men and women, not going to divide them, but the same point. I can only imagine, because there's layers to this. For me, there's layers to just how excited they should be and how inspired they should be. Now, it's the championships. That's layer number one. It is the championships. I remember, I think it was probably 3 years ago. Yeah, I think it was 3 years ago when Jason Garrett lost his job in Dallas. And I think DeMarcus Lawrence, forgive me, I'm trying to paraphrase. It was a while ago. I think DeMarcus Lawrence said something of the sort of, basically, Jason Garrett didn't get us hyped for this game. Something of that sort, not quoting him. And I thought that was so funny to me. It made me laugh, because why do you need to get hyped up about a game that was going to decide who won the division? It was the last week of the season. There's certain games or certain events that you don't need to have outside motivation for. You shouldn't. They should be hyped. They should get you hyped in and of itself. I'm playing for a chance to make it to the playoffs. Why do I need my coach to come in and get me fired up? This is the NCAA championships. I don't need anybody to hype me up. I don't need manufactured excitement. The excitement is right there. This is what we've been working for the whole season. Why anything else? That's layer number one. Just the basic, this is the championships. The moment that I've been waiting for. I don't need anything else to hype me up, personally. And I don't think they would either. So in comes layer number two. And this one is going to be specific to the men. You got a shot. Everybody don't have a shot. North Carolina A&T is the only HBCU a shot at winning NCAA gold, period. And that's no disrespect to anybody else. They just don't have the manpower. North Carolina A&T is coming in with 13 participants, 9 of which being men. Nobody else measures up. The next closest is 3. So you're looking at quadrupling the next closest HBCU. So it ain't even about talent. You just don't have the manpower. You're not winning with 2 people in the tournament or in the championships. You're just not. North Carolina A&T has 9 on the men's side. They have a legitimate chance to win. They've been one of the best programs in the country all year, been at number 1 multiple times. They were 3rd in indoors. So you're looking at situations where we know we can win. It's not a question. I know that I can win if I'm on North Carolina A&T's track and field team. We've shown the requisite talent. We have the requisite amount of athletes that are in the championships. Oh, yeah. We can go after and we can get it. I think that, and they're one of the favorites. They're one of the favorites to win it, as they should be. I even seen an article talking about it's going to come down to a specific event. So we'll watch it. They have Randolph Ross on a team, and it's not just him. It's not just him at all, because you're not just going to win with one player or with one athlete, like I said. But they have Randolph Ross. So they have one of the best athletes in this whole thing. You got a chance. And layer number 3, and this probably is just the extra on top, is Dwayne Ross is leaving for Tennessee after this. He's built up a legacy in North Carolina A&T, and I can't think of a better parting gift than a championship ring. That just makes sense to me for them to do. So I'm looking to see if there's going to be probably run a little harder. Give your best, because this is the last time ever that he's going to be coaching you, unless he poaches some guys to go to Tennessee. These are the 3 layers of motivation, all of which should be enough to get you motivated for the race. It's the championships. Should have you on a high. This is a shot, you actually have a shot. That should get you on a high. Dwayne Ross's last time coaching you is this championship. That should get you on a high. I'm excited for it. These are the things that I'm looking out for. And my second storyline is strictly focused on Howard and their women. They're bringing their 4x4 team. But then you got Jessica Wright, Jessica Goodbye, right? You're looking at those two women running the 200 and the 400. They were phenomenal at Texas relays, and they had really a career day. I'm looking to see how well they'll perform in this tournament. Listen, I know I just talked about North Carolina A&T winning it all, but this is track to me is like an individualized team sport. That's what it is to me, where you're competing against maybe the relay, you have a team, but a team of four. But for the most part, these are individual events, but it all lines up to be for, but it's really individual. So it doesn't matter that, hey, you're not going to win championship as far as a team, but you coming in with a chance for you one-on-one. You know, they always say no I in team, but there is definitely an I in track and field. So there is always an opportunity for you to come out and show your individual greatness. And they ain't even feeling guilty. It's not like person dropped 70 points and a team lost, or this guy threw 500 yards but his team lost. No, I went out there and I beat everybody. I was better than everybody, and I'm going to get the gold. So it's an appreciation factor. So I can't wait to see what those women at Howard do. And it's kind of been a renaissance for Howard track and field on the women's side. They won indoors and outdoors in the MEAC for the first time in 40 years for each. So this has been a great run. I can't wait to see what these ladies do on the national scale. But we'll be back on Friday. Remember, we're 3 days a week. Monday, now today being Wednesday, and then we'll be back on Friday's episode to talk about if there's been something surprising that has happened in track and field. We'll talk about that. If not, we'll, of course, come through with our feature Friday as we do with every Friday. Now, for your second listen of the day, make sure that you're checking out Locked On NBA Big Boards with Rafael Barlow in the game. They're going to give you everything that you need to know for NBA mock drafts, the NBA draft cycle, and then, of course, as the name suggests, NBA Big Boards. Now, in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.